But now we
Yeah.
actually get to talk a little bit about a German tank, and I think you've been looking forward to this one, judging from what you were talking about earlier.
Yeah, I've got a hate up for this tank.
I can see why. So the tank in question that the Germans were using, the actual German design tank, is the A7V. This vehicle.
The floppy Jerry, where
We're
they took 2 years of a beating from the British tanks and saw how effective the design was and ignored everything about it and did something completely different.
there are some
Germany in a nutshell.
yeah there is one good thing I can say about this tank, and that it was fast, but it's also a case where it kind of had issues anyways that hindered its off-road mobility. The biggest problem with it, okay, so there's several problems with this tank. Another thing I should mention is the armor on this thing was actually on paper decent. It had 30 millimeters of armor, which at the time was actually pretty good. It's comparable to what German tanks in World War II would have had in terms of if you just counted sheer thickness.
Mm,
Unfortunate, and by early war I mean, so Panzer IIIs and stuff like that is what I'm
yeah.
comparing this to. Unfortunately, the armor was not heat treated in any way whatsoever. So the actual effectiveness of this armor is considerably less than what it was actually supposed to, than what it actually could have been. And it also was, well, with the armor at this time anyways, tank armor tended to be a little bit inconsistent because of just production issues.
Hmm.
So there tended to usually be weak spots on the armor. So that's something worth noting. One of the other big issues is the sheer number of crew. Now, would you like to let everyone know how many crew was in this tank? Now, it did vary a little bit, but
I believe this particular one had 12.
no. No. So, actually, the source I'm going to use is Military History Visualized, because he did a video on this and was pretty good. The minimum crew number was 16, although it could actually go up to as high as 26 assigned to this one single tank.
Oh boy, you'll have to forgive me. I have been partaking in a little bit of the devil's lettuce this evening.
That's okay. No worries.
So, so the brain is a little bit fuzzy, but the funny thing is I have stood next to two replicas of Mephisto.
Okay.
I have stood next to the one replica in Ottawa, Canada, at the
Mm-hmm.
War Museum there, and the other one in Munster, Germany, at the Panzer Tank Museum.
All right.
And it is impressively freaking tall. Like it's no wonder this thing fell over at the slightest sign of a hill.
Yeah, that's something else I was going to bring up. This tank is taller than it is wide, which led to some, shall we say, interesting characteristics. By the way, this is a picture of one of the tank's crew on the the third picture there. But yeah, by
Hmm.
the way, the reason why the crew was so massive is because they had jobs like they had dedicated carrier pigeon holders. Not so it wouldn't be double duty. It's a guy would be dedicated to that role. You had dedicated runners whose only job was to act as runners for these tanks. You had a dedicated commander for operating the gun. So you had a gunner, a loader, and a mini tank commander, I guess, for just the main gun. Pretty sure all the machine guns had a secondary loader position as well. To be fair, with a belt-fed design, you do kind of usually actually want a loader for that, but
Especially during that era, because those they didn't have disintegrating link.
yeah, they had to use cloth, and it tended to jam up if you only had one person operating it. But yeah, so that's why they had so many crew often. But about the flipping over, that is absolutely a thing. I actually have two photos of these things having flipped over. The first one, I'm not even sure what flipped it over, but turns out having a whole bunch of crew and having a tank that is taller than wide tends to do bad things to its center of gravity.
Yeah, it, the French discovered this too really early on in the war, thank Christ, and they steered away from this design, um, especially towards the later war. But yeah, these taller designs trying to angle the armor so sharply just didn't tend to end well.
Nope, no, it did not. So, yeah, the A7V had issues. Oh, and also, by the way, they only ever produced 20 of these things if you don't count the prototypes. Of these, all but one of the main line were male tanks. There was one single female tank which just replaced the main gun with 2 additional machine guns. So,